Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Random Vlogging. Um, if you guys have figured out the secret to these already, when I start off a random vlogging like this, it generally means I'm going to be talking about some kind of serious pie stuff. Um, on a related note, you may notice that I'm not doing that whole like growly voice intro for a little bit because I recently had surgery on my sinuses where they removed a bunch of polyps and then I believe they performed what's called a rhinoplasty on me. They widened all my sinus, um, all the sinus passages and nasal passages and stuff like that to prevent something like this from happening again. Um, and I'm in an immense amount of pain. And doing that growling thing or even speaking loudly, it vibrates my sinuses, which are still recovering from the surgery. So yeah, I may be avoiding that for the next like month or so, because I've recently been told that I still have like a month left on my recovery. And something I have known for a very long time, pain meds don't work on me. Um, they had me on Tylenol for like a week. They had me on narcotics at one point, which is, ooh, those did work. Those worked really well. But after being on them, I think I was on them for like 4 or 5 days. I actually went through massive withdrawal from 4 or 5 days worth of these narcotics, and I wasn't even taking the full dosage I was allowed to. Like I was taking the minimum dosage. Um, but since then, I've been in an insane amount of pain, and have just recently been allowed to start taking the one painkiller that actually will lessen the pain. It won't get rid of it, but it'll at least manage it somewhat, which is ibuprofen. And the reason they didn't want me taking it before is because it can prevent your blood from clotting, and then I just keep bleeding out, and that'd be bad. So, anyway, um, I actually have two different videos that I want to make, and I'm probably going to get real close to this mic because I really can't speak very loud. It's very painful. Um, I have two different videos that I want to make right now. I have this one, which I really feel like I have to make this one for my own mental health, and hopefully it'll be something that helps other people as well. But I need this for me right now. And the other one I want to make, I'm not even sure if I'm going to make it because um, right now we have an epidemic of hatred that is going through the country I live in, the U.S., and it's actually being seen across the world. The UK is having issues with it. You're seeing it all across the Middle East. Just hatred and this idea of if people don't agree with you, that the ends justify the means. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you stop the people you've decided are wrong, which is a bad thought process, and it ignores centuries of history. But no one's willing to listen to that right now. They just want their echoing chambers. So that's why I may or may not make the second video. But this first one, I need this. I haven't really been able to talk about this for a lot of different reasons. Um, and I don't know. I don't really know how much this is a good idea from an objective viewpoint. But it's something I need to talk about and I need to get off my chest. Um, so I'm going to give you guys a little history lesson. Uh, when I was 19 in college, I was having issues with depression. And I had struggled with depression for years. It had never been diagnosed, but we have a history of it in my family. like everybody in my family has some version of it. Whether it's actual depression, major depressive disorder, or bipolar disorder, or there's mood disorders are very common in my family. So the idea that I would have some form of depression, no one was surprised. And I'd been dealing with it without medication for years. Well, when I was 19, I started experiencing something that I call losing time, which is I would be doing something. I first noticed it when I was working on a paper for one of my classes. And what happened was it was a simple worksheet where they ask a question, you write a short answer. Super, super simple. I think it was for a theater history course. So it was busy work. 90% of homework really is. It's just meant to force people to keep repeating the same things over and over so that they remember it better. And I remember things, right, at least I used to, very easily. And so busy work like that was boring for me. So I'm sitting at my computer, and I've turned off all the games and everything on the computer so I can just focus on this to get through the 20 minutes it's going to take for me to complete this. I remember looking at my clock and seeing it was like 2:30 or something like that. I answered a question. I looked at my clock again, and it was like 4:30, 5 o'clock-ish. And I had answered only one question in 2.5 hours. Which I'm like, okay, maybe I just was daydreaming, but no, I sat back and I tried to think about what happened in that 2.5-ish hours, and I couldn't. In my mind, I looked down, read the question, which took me less than a minute, wrote the answer down because I knew that question I already knew the answer to, and then looked up again. So the entire process took me maybe a minute or two. And in a minute or two of my memory, 2 to 2.5 hours had passed. And I was alone in my room. I had the door closed. I always had the door closed because, unbeknownst to me at that point, I also had anxiety issues, and open doors and the fact that people could just come into my room was a real issue for me. So I always kept my door closed and locked. So I was alone in my room, and I don't know what happened. Doctors actually haven't really been able to explain it either, but it was at that point I'd been struggling with depression. There'd been a lot of really bad things happening recently to me, and so I went into my doctor and explained it, and he diagnosed me with depression and anxiety and put me on meds that screwed me up permanently. The first one he put me on messed with my brain bad enough that I couldn't complete sentences, because by the time I got halfway through the sentence, I would have already forgotten what it was I was trying to say. I would have no idea what was going on anymore. The second one gave me double vision, which I've been to like a dozen doctors now. None of them, in I think 5 or 6 different fields, none of them can explain why, but I have double vision. I have since they put me on it. Double vision is not a side effect of that drug. No one can explain where it comes from, but it's there and it's real. So anyway, the reason I mention that is that was when I realized I had depression and anxiety. And after trying to drug me for, I think it was 7 months, I chose to go off medication. And I talked to my doctor, and he said it was okay because none of them were helping anyways. We later found out that I'm extremely susceptible to serotonin syndrome and everything except for the double vision. All the symptoms that I had can actually be explained away as serotonin syndrome, just showing up differently each time, but it was the same. It was the same reaction. My body just interpreted it differently. So anyway, Um, so from that point on, I had depression and anxiety. I would get panic attacks on a fairly regular basis, but they weren't horrendous at that point. Like I could deal with them. And on a fairly regular basis, I'm talking at that point, I might have gotten a panic attack every couple of months. Um, but I slowly started to get worse and worse to the point where when we go, let's see, April of 2012. So let's see, I don't even know how old I was then. Math is remarkably hard for me right now because of everything that's going on. And the meds that they have me on mess with my head even more. But April of 2012, which was 5 years ago, a little bit over, was the first time I quit a job because I couldn't handle working the job anymore. I couldn't handle the stress. I was having panic attacks on a regular basis, like every week, sometimes a couple times a week. I would have these extreme panic attacks when I woke up in the morning and I had to go to work, where I felt that something incredibly bad was going to happen. My life was in danger. Adrenaline would rush through my body. I started developing issues with attendance and things like that because I would come in late because these panic attacks would paralyze me. I wouldn't be able to leave my bed or get up or get ready for work or anything like that. I'd have to set my alarm in general for, I lived 5 minutes away from my work at the time, and I would have to set my alarm for an hour or so just to be able to give me enough time to deal with the panic attack, and I was still ending up coming in late. But I was a really good worker. Like by the time I got there, I was phenomenal at my job. I could do things that other people couldn't. I turned stores around and made the company crap tons of money. So most of my managers were fine with the fact that I would show up 5 to 10 minutes late to my shifts on a regular basis. But yeah, April of 2012, that was the first time that I quit my job because of my anxiety. And at this point, the only diagnosis I had was depression with anxiety. That was the official diagnosis. And that was it. I was completely unmedicated. Since then, I have not held a job for more than 7 months. Every job I've had since then, I have issues with attendance. I can't get to work on time, and it doesn't matter what time the shift is. It could be a 5 a.m. shift. It could be a shift that I don't have to show up to until 6 or 7 at night. It didn't matter the shift. I would get massive panic attacks that would prevent me from doing anything. And I worked for Goodwill for a little bit, and I got fired. Not because of my attendance, it's because I made a mistake. I owned up to it, and then somebody else lied about it and made it seem like I had intentionally violated one of the rules, and so they fired me over it. And then I spent, I don't know, like 6 or 7 months unemployed because I couldn't find anyone willing to hire me. Went back to the job that I had quit before. Lasted 7 months before I had to quit because I was becoming suicidal because of the panic attacks and the depression. Like I couldn't handle it anymore. So I quit that job. I decided to go back to school because I couldn't handle working in retail anymore to get a degree because I needed some way to support myself. I moved back in with my family because I couldn't get anyone to hire me, and I couldn't hold down a job long enough to get enough money to live. And then while living with my family, I got another job that, like clockwork, 6 months in, I had to quit the job because I was becoming suicidal. I was having panic attacks. I was having issues with attendance and showing up for work and getting work done. And this one I actually spent half of a shift. I think it was 3 or 4 hours working with my supervising manager and a couple other people while I was in a constant panic attack state. I was hyperventilating literally for about 3 hours. I was hyperventilating. I looked crazy, but it was my job. I had to be there. I had to do it, and that was back in 2015, over 2 years ago. Um, and Since then, even without having a job, I wake up every morning to a panic attack. I'm kind of jolted out of sleep. I immediately think that something's going to hurt me, something's going to kill me. I've done something wrong that's going to ruin the rest of my life. I feel adrenaline start pumping, and I'm paralyzed with fear. I can't even get out of bed to go to the bathroom for hours. I'll have to sit there with a full bladder from the night before for hours because I can't convince myself to get out of bed. I can't. I'm so terrified to move, to do anything, that I just sit there for hours upon hours upon hours until I can finally work up the courage to go out, go to the bathroom first, and then take the medication I'm on now is called diazepam, which is the generic version of Valium. Valium is a controlled substance because it's what's called quote-unquote habit forming. It means that you can grow addicted to it. But it's not quite as addictive as something like hydrocodone, which is the narcotic I was on. That's also a controlled substance, but it's listed as addictive because it is significantly easier to build a chemical dependency on it and then a mental dependency on it where you think you need it whether or not you do or not. And that's apparently what addiction is. You have chemical dependency where your body has started to rely on it, and then you have addiction, which is where you have a compulsion to continue doing something whether or not it's actually good for you. That's where addiction comes in, or at least that's my understanding of it. So the Valium that I take, according to my psychiatrist, I am not addicted to Valium. However, I do have a chemical dependency on it. Again, it's a habit-forming drug. You're generally not supposed to be on it for very long. 6 months is generally the maximum you're ever supposed to be on it. I've been on it since December. So at the beginning of December, so I'm going on 9 months now, 8.5 months of being on this habit-forming drug. So the drug itself doesn't really help with the anxiety, which is what it's supposed to treat. Doesn't actually help with the anxiety at all. What it does is it staves off the the withdrawal symptoms, which is the unique thing about Valium withdrawal. And withdrawal in general, one of the things that will happen is when you start going through withdrawal, there's a lot of different things, like you can get migraines, you can get nausea and vomit and all these other things. You can get, night sweats and all these other things that are typical of just withdrawal in general. These are all things that can happen. Well, one of the other things that can happen is the reason that you take the drug, whatever that reason is, whether it's pain, whether it's anxiety, whether it's, whatever you're taking the drug for, when you start going through withdrawal for it, you will, the reason that you were taking the drug will actually intensify. So if you were taking narcotics for pain, you will actually have increased pain after you stop taking them. Not because you're actually in more pain, but the withdrawal makes your brain and tricks it into thinking that you're in more pain than you actually are. I believe the term is sometimes referred to as phantom pain, though phantom pain can also mean something else. But it's not actual real pain. Your nerves are not transmitting more pain signals to your brain. Your brain is interpreting the same level of pain as higher as part of the withdrawal. And so for me, for the Valium, one of the withdrawal symptoms is my anxiety increases to higher levels than it was before they put me on it. Now, the reason they put me on the Valium is I was committed to a psych ward. And because my therapist feared that I was going to hurt myself. And while I was there, I had a psychiatrist assigned to me who, to use the exact correct terminology, was a douche nozzle. And we used to have conversations like this, where I would go, "Hey doc, I've been on medication for my depression and anxiety before. Bad things happen. Whatever the worst side effect is, I'm going to get that. And none of them have actually helped the depression or anxiety. They've just made it worse." Well, maybe that just means you have been on the right one. No, I've been on quite a few different ones. Well, you know what? You're here for a reason, all right? It's your fault that you're here. You told your psychiatrist that you were contemplating suicide, so it's your fault that you're here. And you know what? If you're not willing to work at this, nobody's going to believe that you actually have any of these symptoms. They're going to think you're making it up. If someone was to come to me and say that they had extreme anxiety and extreme issues with depression and they weren't taking any medication for it, I wouldn't believe that they had them. So why would anyone else, if you're not trying to treat it, you're not trying to get better? And so because of that, and because I have massive issues with self-worth, they put me on another drug. The drug's called fluoxetine, which is the generic version of Prozac. If you used to watch television in, I want to say, late 90s, early 2000s, you probably saw commercials for Prozac. Hell, they may still have commercials for Prozac. I'm not sure. Prozac is an antidepressant, anti-anxiety. They actually use it for a lot of different things. And it's actually very mild. It's one of the reasons why they use it for so many different things. It's very slowly metabolized, meaning it stays in your bloodstream for a long time. It's a relatively mild, what's called an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I'm not going to go into all the science behind how it works, but the very basics of it is serotonin's a neurotransmitter. It goes between your nerve cells to transmit messages. Sometimes the receiving nerve cell does not absorb the serotonin fast enough, and your body is built with these safeguards. So, in order to prevent a toxic level of serotonin accumulating, what happens is the sending nerve cell will reuptake the serotonin if it's not absorbed fast enough. SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it stops that reuptake process, gives the other nerve just a little more time to absorb that serotonin so that the message goes through fully. I don't 100% understand why that causes depression, anxiety, and all those other things, and doctors don't either. They just know that this usually works. So they put me on the lowest dose physically possible because of the side effects that I've had. And I was out of the hospital a couple days later because the doc, when I went into the hospital, I was already able to prove that I was not a danger to myself, but they still wanted me there just to be on the safe side. And so I left a couple days later, and the day after I was there, or the day after I left, I developed convulsions in my upper body that wouldn't stop. And they were not fun. My entire upper body was shaking constantly. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't do anything. It was just the entire time. It looked like I was having a seizure. It wasn't a seizure, but that's what it looked like. Constantly. So I went to my doctor. He told me to stop taking the fluoxetine because it had caused what's called serotonin syndrome. It's also called serotonin toxicity. I had too much serotonin in my brain, and it was causing bad things to happen to me. The convulsions, I actually had a temperature. I think I was I think I was a tenth of a degree under 100 for a month and a half, and the shaking and all these other symptoms. And serotonin syndrome is deadly. It kills people. So had I continued taking this drug that this douche nozzle had basically guilt-tripped me into taking, and he'd actually suggested before I was going to be able to see my doctor, he wanted me to increase the dosage. Had I increased the dosage, I'd probably be dead now. Had I stayed on the drug, I'd probably be dead now. A little while later, they tried me on. I went through 5 or 6 different drugs after then. None of them did anything. All of them made the symptoms worse. They gave me another one that's actually been proven to cause serotonin syndrome in people. They gave it to me anyway because, I don't know, they didn't believe I had serotonin syndrome. It reactivated the serotonin syndrome right after I had started recovering from it because, again, fluoxetine is a very slowly metabolized thing. It took a month and a half. It took technically 29 days since my last dose for the fluoxetine to actually be completely out of my system. So a month of constantly shaking and seizing and convulsing. And so they put me on the Valium at that point to control the convulsions because the Valium is a sedative. And at first, it worked really well to control the convulsions, but it also got me really high, which I don't actually enjoy. Some people really enjoy like being drunk and being high and stuff like that. I've never been one of those people. I've never gotten high on purpose. So maybe it's a different experience when you do it intentionally. And the one time I was drunk was not a good experience. So, but I don't enjoy that feeling of that loss of connection to reality. I don't enjoy that feeling of not being in control of myself, not being able to do the things I want to do. And so I had this constant struggle of I would wait as long as I could physically endure the pain of muscles that would just continually be shaking and these massive panic attacks and this overwhelming feeling of depression and everything. And then I would take one of these Valium and then I'd have to deal with this overwhelming sense of a loss of control and everything. But it would relax my muscles, and so I could relax while I was dealing with something else. And it was this living hell that I went through for about a month and a half. Well, after that was done, they wanted me to stay on the Valium, which I have, as a way to attempt to treat my anxiety, because my anxiety is at a level that has surpassed dangerous. I can't I can't leave my room most of the time. I'm so terrified of going out and having a panic attack and not being able to deal with it, not being able to get to somewhere safe. I can't go to movies anymore. I can't go to conventions at all. The last convention I went to not because I wanted to, but because I was helping run it. And because I was helping run it, I had a hotel room in the hotel that we were at, and I never left my hotel room for normally more than about 3 or 4 hours, because at that point the panic attacks would get so bad that I would lose the ability to understand basic concepts like numbers. I wouldn't be able to understand numbers. I could read them, like I could say, well, that's a 9, that's a 3, that's a 2, but the idea of what those numbers meant, the values that they had, was completely lost on me. I couldn't tell you. I knew 9 was bigger than 3 and 9 was bigger than 8, but I couldn't add or subtract or anything like that. I certainly couldn't do multiplication or division or anything like that. They were just symbols that I knew had value, but I couldn't tell you what they were. In general, I'd only stay out of the room that I had for a couple of hours, and then I'd have to go back. All the time, still on my Valium, still trying to get under some form of control over this. And since then, I have developed what's called a tolerance to the Valium, which is common in addiction in general. That's how addiction works, is you start it by building a tolerance to whatever the drug is, where it doesn't have the same effect it used to. Like, I now can take Valium and I don't get high off of it. But it also doesn't relax me at all anymore. It doesn't affect my anxiety anymore. But if I stop taking the Valium, then my already unhealthy levels of anxiety increase. And so I get to the point where I can't handle it anymore, and I start trying to figure out ways that I can just stop. And there aren't any drugs I can take right now. Valium, the class of drug that it is are what are called benzodiazepines. It's an entire class of drugs. I think there's like 4 or 5 different ones. Diazepam is the one that I use. There's things lorazepam, clonazepam. They always end in pan. I think they all do basically the same thing in slightly different ways, but they're all quote unquote habit forming. And because they're all the same drug class, if you switch from one to another, you're addicted to, one, and you switch to another, that addiction stays. The dependency stays because of the same class of drug. They do the same basic thing. So your body will just start using the new drug the same way it used the old drug. So now I'm 8 months into being on this addictive substance that I can't stop. I asked my psychiatrist if we can consider increasing my dose, because it's getting to the point where I can't handle the anxiety anymore. And increasing the dose has, instead of improving things, has actually caused my anxiety levels to raise even more, to the point where now I'm, like I said, now I'm spending 4 hours in bed needing to pee really, really bad, and completely incapable of leaving my bed, because I'm paralyzed with terror and hopelessness from my anxiety and depression. I've now been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, chronic, or I think major depressive disorder they have listed as moderate. I have chronic generalized anxiety disorder. I have a panic disorder with agoraphobia. I have social anxiety disorder, and I have PTSD, which medically, as far as my medical charts are concerned, I don't have PTSD listed on there, but my therapist has diagnosed me with PTSD due to the symptoms that I show. Things like, here's a weird thing, if you ever want to scare yourself. When I walk into a room, I count exits. I look for how many different ways I can leave the room. I look for how hard it's going to be to leave the room. I also look for places of safety. I look at the walls and figure out, would they stop bullets? I look at desks and things like that and see, is that something that I could use to create a barricade? Are the windows, is the glass thick enough that I could break through it and leave in that direction? Are the walls made of something that I could break through easily if I needed to make another exit? This is how I enter every single room. And in general, I can tell you, within a couple of minutes of entering a room, I can sit there and go, well, there's one traditional exit. There's two other exits that I could make if I was needed to. If I needed to hide behind something, this will stop bullets, or I believe this will stop bullets. I'm not an expert on it, but I'll sit there and go, well, this is a super thick, metal desk. I think bullets would at least be slowed by it. That kind of thing. And that's how I enter every single room, every single building I go into. When I enter a new section of the grocery store, if I'm looking down an aisle, I'll look to see how many people are there, because that'll affect how quickly I can leave the aisle if something bad happens. If someone tries to hurt me or kill me, start shooting at me, or if I start having a panic attack and I become nonverbal, which happens to be now. If I get really, really bad panic attacks, I first develop a stutter, and then I become nonverbal, to where I attempt to speak, but the stutter is so pronounced that I can't get anything out. And so I just sit there tripping over my words, trying to say something as I'm rocking back and forth, and I'm shaking, and I'm starting to cry, and I look crazy, and I look a little dangerous, and it's terrifying. And so that's what my life is right now. Even in my little safe space in my room, I still have these incredible panic attacks that rob me of the ability to do anything that I want. So the reason I'm talking about this is there's a brilliant musician. She's a YouTuber named Dodie Clark. She is phenomenal. She has a brand new EP that she just released. It's doing really, really well, and I'm really, really happy for her, because she deserves absolutely everything that she's getting right now. She really does. She's a phenomenal person. And one of the songs on this new EP is a song that she wrote for a friend that was going through an incredibly difficult time. And for the life of me right now, I cannot remember what the song is called, but the basics of it, of the lyrics are, I know this hurts, and I know that I can't understand what you're going through because I'm not going through it. I understand that because I've been in a similar position. But it does end, and you can get through it. And I know you don't believe me, and I know that this seems like it's never going to end. But when you do get through it, you'll be able to look back and understand what was happening and why it happened and everything like that. And she doesn't really go into a whole lot of description as to what the experience was that her friend was going through, whether it was a really bad breakup, whether it was dealing with some sort of mental illness or something like that. But this is actually a very common thing that is, first of all, it's been told to me, it's been told to other friends I know that suffer from mental disorders like anxiety and depression. And it's all culminated in this phrase that I vehemently despise. It is one of the most hated phrases I have ever heard. Just saying it causes my blood to boil, and that phrase is this. And it's very one of the reasons that I hate it so much is because it sounds like good advice. And trained professionals use this in an attempt to help people. And so what that phrase is suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary situation. And the thought process behind it is trying to convince people not to commit suicide, because what they're going through, while yes, it is real and it's bad, it'll pass. It'll get better. And for some people that are contemplating suicide, that is 100% true. Depression lies. I have a complicated opinion about Will Wheaton, but he writes on his blog on a fairly regular basis about depression and how it lies, and how it tells you and convinces you things that aren't true. Things like you're worthless. Things like you're always going to feel this way. You're always going to feel helpless and worthless and hopeless. And that's not true. Because depression's not an all-time thing. It's not always just feeling sad or something like that. Depression comes in waves. It comes in patterns and things like that. And so what you're feeling at that particular point is not going to exist for forever. And if you can just make it through that really bad time, there's a very good chance that you're going to get better. Anxiety does the same thing. Anxiety lies. It's a little bit more direct in its lying. It doesn't try and convince you things, doesn't try to convince you that things that aren't true are true. It simply overrides your body and tells your body that things are happening that aren't. That's what a panic attack is. It's your fight or flight response activating. Fight or flight floods your body with adrenaline, starts making you breathe faster, your heart pump faster to get necessary fuel to your muscles so that you can either fight whatever it is that's trying to kill you, or you can flee from it. You can run away. Both of those require your muscles to have extra amounts of energy. When there's nothing to fight or flight from, having all this extra energy is just terrifying. And when you can't figure out why it's happening, it's maddening. And so, yeah, anxiety lies too. It lies in a different way, but it lies. And for some people, it's a temporary thing. It goes away. But for some people, like me, it doesn't. Like I said, I'm 29 now. I've been struggling with depression and anxiety, diagnosed depression and anxiety for a decade. And it hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse. Not only has it gotten worse, but I have had to prove that it's real over and over again. I'm sorry, my nose is feels like I've got like a hair or something on it. It's driving me nuts. I've had to prove to doctors, to Government officials to bosses and things like that. I've had to prove over and over again that it's real, that I'm not making this up. I've been accused of lying so many times. I can't. I can't remember half of them, and it's not getting better. It's getting worse, and I don't have a way to fix it. I have a therapist. She's wonderful. She's amazing. She has 100% helped me be able to identify some of the things that trigger my panic attacks. I still have a lot of panic attacks that either don't have a trigger, they just happen, or we haven't identified what the trigger is because it's locked so far in my subconscious that we have no idea. So I still have unexplained panic attacks on a daily basis. But she's been wonderful and amazing. She's been helping me out, but due to circumstances far beyond my control, at this particular point in my life, my therapist and I have both kind of accepted the fact that her job is mitigation right now. It's keeping me alive until I can get better, because right now I can't. And there's a lot of stuff that I can't talk about. I don't want to talk about. Some of it's personal. Um, some of it is very, very complicated, and I don't want to get into it. But the fact of the matter is, I'm getting worse, and I can't get better. And so this idea of, well, don't worry, it's going to get better, is true for a lot of people. It really is. And I don't want to say to anyone that congratulations, you're fucked. You're never going to get any better. Because a vast majority of the time with mental illness and things like that, there's so many different things that you can do to treat it and to live a completely normal life. If you do struggle with mental illness in any way, just even if you don't think you have depression or anxiety or anything, but every so often you'll have a panic attack, or every so often you'll just feel this overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Talk to a doctor, talk to a professional, a licensed therapist, someone like that. You'll be absolutely shocked at what they can do. But for a small minority of us, it doesn't get better. It just gets worse. And so for the rest of my life, if everything goes the way that I want it to go, all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes right now that I can't talk about, if every single thing goes the exact way that I want it to go, for the rest of my life, I will have unexplained panic attacks. I will never be able to get treatment for them because, well, I guess I can't say never, because it's theoretical that they may find a new way to treat it, but they've been treating anxiety and depression the same way for 2 or 3 decades now. They find new drugs all the time that do the same things in a slightly different way, but the treatment methods are, it's linked to serotonin and norepinephrine levels in your brain. That's what it is. That's how psychiatry is defined. Anxiety and depression it's all based on neurotransmitters. And I can't take any of those meds. They will literally kill me. The only meds that I can take are addictive and are short-term fixes. They are temporary solutions to a permanent problem, to spin a phrase. And so, yeah, I'm mad. I really am. because more than anything else, I would like to be able to take a pill and for this to all go away. God damn it. It's like I have something on my nose. It's driving me nuts. I mean, I know I have something on my nose. They're called glasses, but stop that. So yeah, I'm mad and I'm exhausted and I'm tired of being told that it's going to get better. It's going to get better. This is temporary. It's not temporary for me. I get to live with these diseases, these mental disorders for the rest of my life. They never go away. Generally, other people that live with them find ways to treat them so that despite the fact that they have these mental disorders, they can live completely normal, happy lives. I can't. The drugs don't work. Right now, therapy helps in the fact that it gets me through the week, but doesn't make it better. It just stops it from getting to the point where I do something stupid. And eventually, the medication that I'm on, they're going to have to take me off of it. Because again, the longer you're on it, the worse the withdrawal symptoms are going to be. And the less that it actually does. Because again, you build up this tolerance to it. Your body is just not affected by it anymore. So that's what I have to look forward to, going through withdrawal symptoms that include increased anxiety levels to the point that I already know I can't handle. Possibly other side effects, including nausea, vomiting, fevers, chills, all these other wonderful symptoms of withdrawal. That's my future right now. Yeah, it really is insulting for someone to try and comfort me with the fact that, well, it's only temporary. You'll get through this. Just fight through it just a little bit longer. How I am now with panic attacks multiple times a week, now daily, I've lived this way for somewhere between 4 to 6 years. This has been my reality. And I fought through it for 4 years. And every day that I make it to the end of the day and I haven't hurt myself is a huge victory for me. It really is. But when I wake up the next morning, hyperventilating, trying to figure out what it is that's trying to kill me, I get to start all over again. And that's not changing. It hasn't changed in 4 years. And I'm just tired of people telling me, well, it's going to get better. It's going to get better, Jody. Just a little bit long. It's going to get better. No. If it was going to get better, it would have. This is my life. This is how I have to live. And I'm not saying that I'm suicidal or anything like that. First of all, I've already found out what happens when I say I'm suicidal. They lock me in a psych ward. So that's not happening again. That was nightmare. That was a waking nightmare, especially for someone with agoraphobia, where a lot of people misunderstand agoraphobia as like just being afraid to go outdoors. It's not. What agoraphobia is afraid of being trapped at a place where you'll have a panic attack or something will happen and you won't be able to get out of it. You won't be able to get to a safe place. So, because of that, it tends to manifest and look like they're afraid to leave their house, or in my case, I'm afraid to leave my room. It's not that I'm afraid to leave my room. It's that my room is my safe space. My room is my place where if I do have a panic attack, I don't have to worry about other people freaking out about it, because it does make people very uncomfortable to see me having a panic attack. And I don't have to worry about people reacting the wrong way, thinking that I'm dangerous, because it is a common myth that people with mental illnesses are dangerous. It's one of the reasons why every time there's a shooting, one of the first things they talk about is the mental state of the person. It is 100% a myth. I addressed it in my Stopping the Stigma show. But yeah, if I have a really bad panic attack in public and people think I'm dangerous, people with mental illnesses get shot by police because they don't understand what's going on. There was a man in Milwaukee, if I remember, within the past year that was shot because he was having an episode. I believe he had, I don't even know, it might have been something on the autism spectrum, but they decided that he was dangerous and that he presented a danger to the community, and they shot him. And that happens a lot, and it doesn't get reported. And so my agoraphobia is based on the idea that I'm afraid someone is going to react poorly to it and try and do something that will stop me, or that my life will be in danger because some police officer, because they don't train them how to deal with people with severe mental disabilities, will see me shaking and saying incoherent things and walking around and pacing and looking very, very angry, because that's kind of how I look when I'm having a panic attack, and decide that I'm dangerous and decide to take me out. That's the world that I get to live in. So yeah, I realize this is a massively long video. I don't even know. Oh yeah, it's just an hour-long video of me talking about random shit. But yeah, I needed to talk about this. Now I'm not trying to belittle anybody. I will ask, please never, ever, ever use the statement suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, because it's simply insulting and it doesn't help anybody. There are better ways to talk somebody out of suicide, because you're basically calling them stupid at that point. There are, again, being suicidal, there are much better ways to deal with a suicidal person that the end result will be they don't commit suicide. So please never use that statement. However, I'm not telling you not to tell people that it does get better, because in most cases it does. I am a unique situation. I am atypical. I have heard that phrase so many times, it has become a four-letter word for me. Yeah, you're kind of an atypical case. Well, you're an atypical case. Well, you're an atypical case. Yeah, I know, I'm weird. So I'm not trying to say don't tell people that it gets better, because it does. For 99% of the population, it does get better. But please, please, please understand, for some people like me, it doesn't get better. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And continuing to insist that well, you're overreacting, this is just a temporary thing, is insulting. It's hurtful because you're belittling the massive amount of pain and agony that I deal with on a daily basis. And there's some times that I can get through it. I'm what's called high functioning because I'm a brilliant liar. I'm an actor, and so there can be instances, you guys have seen it in videos, where I don't look like I'm anxious at all, and I don't look like I'm depressed, and I can look happy, and I can look like I'm having a good time, and I can do things like run D&D games like I did yesterday, and all these things, and they call it high functioning because every so often I can trick people into thinking that I'm not disabled, that I don't have these mental disorders, and I can mask it and hide it. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It doesn't mean that I'm not struggling with it or I'm not having a panic attack. I just learned to lie really, really well. And because of that, it makes it even harder for me to convince people that this is real in those situations that I can't hide it anymore, that I can't deal with it anymore, that I'm paralyzed lying in bed praying that I don't wet myself because I can't walk the 20 feet to the bathroom out of sheer terror that something's going to kill me. So anyway, like I said, I just needed to talk about this with somebody. And you guys are the closest thing I have right now, to be blunt. So, yeah. I do want to mention I am not suicidal right now. I'm not planning on hurting myself or anything like that. I'm just exhausted, and I'm in a lot of pain. So, yeah, that's all for me today. If you guys did watch this whole thing, thank you. I do appreciate it. Kind thoughts, prayers, things like that are always welcome. Please do not, for the love of God, please do not try and tell me how to fix this. Because, first of all, I have not given you anywhere near enough information. Oh, man. It's like there's a hair or something on my nose, and it's driving me nuts. I have not given you near enough information for you to be able to diagnose what's wrong with me, much less come up with a solution for it. And I really don't care to hear that, well, your brother had this, or your cousin's, best friend's third daughter had, something similar and this worked for them. I really don't care about that stuff. So please, 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 please do not try to give me advice in the comment section. I will probably just delete it. Because again, I have visited a dozen doctors that this is all they do. And their answer has been, you're fucked. But we're going to keep trying. And we're going to continue to see if we can come up with something new that we haven't tried before. So unless you have a medical degree and access to my specific medical records, do not give me advice. It will simply upset me. But everything else, the kind words, the support, you guys have been amazing. I'm floored every single time I hear people that I've never met before say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Hey, I'm praying for you. Hey, here's a virtual hug. I know what you're going through is hard and I wish I could help. Stuff like that means the world to me. Because while there really isn't almost anything you guys can do to physically help me, the emotional support does get me through the rough days. It really does. So anyway, that's all for me. I'll see you guys later. All right. Bye bye.